And we're bringing in here Gary, Talitha, and Valary. And I believe we have everybody ready to go. We've got Gary, Valary, and we're getting Talitha in here. So, hey guys, how you doing? What'd you think of that presentation by David?
Hard to follow.
Hard to follow, I know, right?
That's what I was thinking. He's always hard to follow, but that's okay.
Yeah.
This whole day's been hard to follow. This whole day.
It's been one good topic after another for sure. And you guys are going to be continuing the theme of 5 ways to adapt to a new normal. So let's just chat about that while we get Talitha in here real quick. That has been an ongoing theme for the day. As you kick off your discussion, Gary, I'm sure you have lots of thoughts on that. Let's just bring everybody up to speed on who will be joining you today. So we have Talitha Casten, who's joining us in just a moment. And then we have Gary Schulties, who is the president of Global eLearning and the host and sponsor of our conference. So thanks, Gary, for putting all this on and putting this together for us.
Thank you, Suzanne. Appreciate it. Your help's been great.
Great. And then we have Valary. Go ahead and say it for me. Oleinik? Oleinik. Okay. Didn't want to mess that up too bad. Valary is gamification of learning speaker and coach. And I'm sure Valary has a lot to talk about with adapting to the new normal and e-learning. So as we get Talitha prepared here, give me just a moment, Gary. Just check on technical difficulty.
Valary, we can start with getting some perspectives from you because there's a lot to talk about today, and Talitha will join us, I'm sure, in just a couple of minutes.
I was going to say, I'm going to hand it over to you, Gary, and let you start the discussion.
Let me just get started because I want to ask Valary just an opening question that she's not prepared for.
That's okay.
I just want to know the function that you have. Tell us about this whole role of being a coach and a mentor. What is the functions that you have?
Yeah, well, what's kind of interesting, and I feel like I have sort of an unfair advantage in some ways to this year because I actually have 2 sides to my career, and I'm also a project manager at a law firm you heard about earlier today, Weil, that worked with Skillsoft, and I've been a project manager there for a very long time, working with the training and development side of things there. But then I do this other life. And so it kind of put me in this great position because what that means is I have already for a number of years now been going in and helping people to create engagement in whatever type of environment they were in. So sometimes it was in person, sometimes it was online. And this year I was sort of very popular at times because people said, we have these on-site things. We know you do something with distance education. We don't really understand what you do, but can you come talk to us? So kind of like your question, it was like, what exactly is this? So really that's what it was about, was helping people transition from on-site to online and whatever that looked like and whatever type of e-learning. To David's point, e-learning is kind of a broad term. So yeah. So that's kind of the nutshell of it. Yeah.
Good. Well, let me start off by just telling a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to let you comment about my life. And that is, I started in March with believing that this shutdown, the lockdown to send everybody home out of our office here in Annapolis, Maryland, was going to be about an 8 to 12 week little thing that has to happen. I took the attitude that we need to just hunker down and just endure this. And then everything can come back to normal in about 12 weeks. Somehow, some way, we're going to get through this. The virus will pass and we'll resume our normal, right? And so what's happened since has been a real change for me. To be able to then say, it's not going to return. My staff to this day has not returned. We've had to reimagine, as Brian Kropp said with Gartner, we've had to reimagine what it means just to have a team, just to make decisions, to have a team is now done this way by a virtual type of conference. What do you see as something that you are advocating that companies need to embrace, individuals like myself need to embrace and say, you've got to look at your team differently, and there's new things you've got to do to be able to keep that concept of team and all the things that come with it. You need to think differently, Gary. So please go ahead and coach me up.
Well, first, I want to acknowledge that Talitha has joined us. And so I just want
There's
to
Talitha.
say hi to Talitha.
Welcome, Talitha.
Hi. Sorry,
I see we got her in.
I kept unmuting and it wasn't actually letting you guys hear me. It's not letting me share my camera on my laptop. So I'm still trying to join that way. But in the meantime, I figured I'd call in.
That's great. We're glad to have you.
Well,
So,
I
Valary,
think her story,
please go ahead.
I was going to say, I think her story actually just goes right to the point. One of the first things that I was helping people with was a lot of it. Everybody was focusing on the technical piece of it. Well, we just have to make sure everybody has a laptop. Everybody has to have Zoom, everybody, or whatever, platform. And everybody was so focused on the technical part that I kind of came in being my little wacky space that I'm in. And I was like, well, wait a minute. First of all, you have to normalize the weirdness. First, you just have to stop for a second, take a breath, and just go, this is weird. You have to you have to do that. You have to give people the space to kind of be okay that they're feeling really disrupted because they are really disrupted. And Gary, you were not alone by any stretch. I mean, that was the story I kept hearing. And, at the law firm, that was the position that they really took. They had never had people work from home. That was not part of law firm culture. And so there was this idea of we just have to hunker down, as you said, and do it. And then I think over time, what happened was what I've tried to encourage people to do is you have to create those new spaces. You have to create the shared spaces because you don't have that organic, I bump into somebody in the hallway and it feels really weird at first because you have to do it intentionally. And that's sort of a double-edged thing because like intentional is very empathetic and respectful and everything, but it's also very scheduled and it feels unnatural at first, but you have to kind of experiment with that and find out what those shared spaces are. Because people they get very locked in the screen. When I coach teachers, particularly, they're very focused on I'm in the screen. That emergency, that remote emergency teaching. I've had some of them. I'm like, you're in a physical space, and they're in a physical space, and the screen is just helping us. It's not. It has to be not an impediment. So it's a mindset thing, really. A lot of it is, creating that and creating new shared rituals. I think whether it's a TGIF sort of event where you get together and take virtual field trips, or those kind of things that, again, at first some people are going to be like, that feels, I have work to do. I don't want to do that.
Right.
And you get the resistance, but a lot of the resistance also just comes from, I think, people sort of processing, kind of going through their own. Everybody has their own sort of. Many of us have. I've lived half in the screen for a long time now, so to me it's not a foreign land, but to some other people it's a very foreign land. And it's also intrusive. People are now being invited into your home that never were invited into your home. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling for some people too.
Interesting. That's great. Talitha, welcome again.
Yeah, can you guys hear me this time?
Oh, we can hear you. We can see you. It's fantastic.
Perfect. When all else fails, turn it off and back on.
There we go. Just reboot. Talitha, the question I asked Valary is this. When we first started this whole pandemic and we shut down here in Maryland for what we thought was going to be 8 to 12 weeks or so, and it was just a matter of surviving, right? Just survive. We'll get back to our normal, and I'll be able to touch and feel and speak and all the things we would normally do. But it's continued. My team has not come back. And here we are, November, and it looks like this could be starting to have the flavor of a little bit of permanency. I may be in a place where I don't really get to see my team for 8 hours a day anymore. In your mind, in what you do with Tesla, do you feel that there's just a whole different concept of team that we have to be cognizant of and are things that we have to work on to make all those aspects of team still function for us?
Yes. And I think, a big part of making that successful, and for the concept of, I don't know that for me, it's that the concept of teams is really changing, but what's changing is how we interact as teams and how we keep teams cohesive and collaborative and create team culture. And so for me, I think part of what comes to the surface is finding ways to do all the things that you do in an office, but virtually. So for example, when you're in a physical space, obviously you can see each other's faces. So doing Zoom or Teams, WebEx, some sort of similar platform where you can share a video and see each other's faces. When you're in an office setting, you can turn around in your chair and have small talk with your teammates, not about work stuff, but just small talk. And so having a team chat channel of some sort, where you're not just talking about work, you're sharing funny thoughts throughout the day, or you're checking in on each other, anything you would ordinarily talk about in an office other than work. And having that be an acceptable part of the day. Another way to do this is to take 15 minutes of the beginning of a team meeting to check in with each other, talk about what you did on the weekend, all the things that you would normally do on a Monday morning, like, hey, how was your weekend? Just taking time for that in a formal meeting setting in the beginning. So not jumping straight into business and forgetting that there's a human on the other side of it. I think there's a few other things that you can do to make it seem, or all the things that you do in person but virtually. So I don't know about you, but I preferred my one-on-ones over coffee. So oftentimes the first part of a one-on-one is walking to get coffee. So why not give each other time to grab coffee from the kitchen before the one-on-one, or it is an added bonus, take your laptop with you so you feel like you're in each other's kitchens. You can still do team building activities like playing online games, and leaders don't have to be the one to organize this. Asking for a volunteer from your team to find a fun online game is a way to keep your teammates engaged and give them ownership of the team morale. And then I think the last thing that was really big for us with this shift was we made birthdays and work anniversaries a big deal. And we would decorate desks and we would bring in a bunch of balloons. So finding ways to still celebrate people, even though we can't be in the same place. Maybe that's sending out an email to the entire team, acknowledging that person. Again, playing an online game. Maybe ask everyone to send that person their best gift. Or if anyone's local to that person, maybe one person drops off balloons. Or order yummy treats to be delivered. I think there's still ways to celebrate people and acknowledge birthdays and work anniversaries other than being in an office.
Great. Hey, listen, you and Valary both seem so natural in this context. You guys both, before COVID, probably already were doing this. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
I know, Valary, you mentioned that.
Yep.
Talitha, you look like this is something normal for you, right? Is there, over a period of time, for me, this is an 8-month thing now. Does it get more natural over time, or are you doing something, little tricks of the trade, let's call it, of making sure that what we've lost on face-to-face, that nonverbal type of communication, are you doing anything intentionally to try to bridge that little link that's missing? I'm just looking for little hints. What can I do? And I love the idea of just taking my laptop with me to the kitchen, and you can watch me do my coffee, because that's what we would normally be doing. But is there other things that we can do to make sure that I'm not missing what that eye contact would do, that information that flows, and reading somebody's face? Is there something that I need to be doing?
I mean, for me, it's just constantly reminding myself that the people I'm engaging with are just that, they're people. And so it's putting whatever task is at hand on pause and just being a human first. And whether that means asking them questions about how things are going in their life, or, hey, where's your pup? Let me see your puppy. Like just whatever that is, because from that breeds organic conversation and interaction, as opposed to us all just operating like robots and moving on about our to-do list.
Yeah. And Valary, you look like you're in a professional studio, right? And I've tried my best to make sure that my background looks very attractive. So I got a nice plant and all. I got Mark Twain in the background. When I first started my Zoom conferencing with my staff, and I heard dogs barking and children coming through, at first I was offended. I honestly thought, come on, guys, this is important. I'm making time for you. Why are you allowing these interruptions to occur? And then over time, I realized how important it was to allow that to happen in these meetings, to allow and I should have got this from the beginning, that, it happens we're in the office, things interrupt. And so there should be nothing different about this Zoom conference. I need to allow life to happen around our conversation and just embrace it. Yeah. Have you figured that out a long time ago, Valary?
Well, what I was going to say, a couple of things. I absolutely agree with Talitha. Like one of my phrases is always remember the human. Just remember the human. There's somebody over there. But I think we also need to remember that there's a difference between people who chose to work remotely. Some people have been doing it for decades and they chose to do it. And those people probably have set up spaces where it's less likely, not that the child isn't, their dog or the whatever isn't going to bark, or the neighbors are going to be mowing the grass, is what usually happens to me. Not that that's not going to happen, but there's a difference between that and people who were forced into it. Mm-hmm. So again, there's that component to it. So that's why I love, Talitha's suggestions, and that's what I say, remember the human. And also just that whole idea of a dear friend of mine always says connection before content. Like you wouldn't, if you were doing something in person, if you were teaching in person, you wouldn't walk into the training room and just start spouting out content. I would hope. You would go in and you'd be like, hi, hi Gary, it's nice to see you. What brought you here? So again, it's different, but it doesn't have to be as different as we think it does. There's so much of it that doesn't have to be different. Go have the coffee, go, bring the phone with you, bring the computer with you. I did that the first few weeks when New York, because the office where I normally would be working is in Manhattan. When Manhattan got locked down, I intentionally did conference calls and things from my dining room table, and you could see my kitchen and you could whatever, because I wanted people to see, like, it's okay. We're all kind of figuring it out. Like, yes, I could go sit in an office or whatever, but it was like, make it human. And for me, the only technical things I would say, and you both look wonderful. But since you mentioned kind of the setup thing, the one thing I do encourage people is you do have to be able to see each other and hear each other. So if I was going to do, the first thing I tell people is like, please don't sit with your back to the window and look like you're in witness protection, because that is very hard. It's hard to have that conversation and to maintain that connection with people.
Right.
And sometimes that's all they have, sometimes that may just be where they have to sit. But, if they can get a little light, or they can, something, or, like I'm wearing a headset today because I know there's potentially going to be noise, and I want to make it a conversation and not so distracting. So, I think there's little things, like that, but it's less, as I said before, it's less about the technology than just using your creativity and remembering that it really, it's people, it's still people. It was kind of the story earlier today when the CFO said, oh, the employees are people. Yeah,
they're real humans.
They're real
not
people.
Just workers, they're actually real humans. But so I can sum up this point, because Suzanne put us on the spot and said there has to be 5 ways to adapt, right? So the first thing is this, and I'm asking the question, is this more permanent than we think? this type of communication, this type of a team, we're going to have to settle in and say, we're going to be creative and make this work.
I mean, I would kind of encourage people to stop using the phrase the new normal. I saw somebody
Right.
recently start referring to it as the next normal, because the
Right.
new normal sort of implies a static position that we're all, if we can all just get across the bridge to the other side, like we'll be fine, we'll be there.
Right.
And I mean that not to be, scary, but the last in-person large scale event I went to, some friends were there who live in Asia, and they were very clear about that. They're like, we've been through other SARS and other viruses and other,
Correct.
they're
Yes.
like, this isn't the one, like this is a one that, so
Right.
I think just kind of understanding that then, we're taking steps. It's you're taking steps
Mhm.
across the pond or whatever, the little stepping stones or whatever.
Right.
And, we're going to the next normal, and just maintaining that sort of feeling of, hey, look, we did this and it's going to, we'll be okay. We just have to keep at it. And,
Yeah, that's a great point, because it is a pandemic, and we know that there's even worse germs out there that people have been playing with for years. So this could be just the first of others that are coming. So that's a great point. We had a speaker earlier today, Amanda Voles from Goodyear, who was talking about the leadership skills that she was saying were going to be necessary for 2021 and the years of this decade going forward. And I don't want to go back and just review those, but I would like just to get your opinion, both of you. What are you seeing as the new leadership skills that people like myself, that you have already adapted? What are the new leadership skills going forward for the new leader? Let's call it. Talitha, you want to go first?
Sure. This might seem kind of like a funny skill, but learning how to not be a micromanager. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. And I feel like in this setting where you are not in the same office, to be able to like keep an eye on your team, it can be really easy for leaders to revert to kind of micromanaging. So the skill of learning how to give your team autonomy. So a huge part of this for us has been fine-tuning or creating a project management strategy. So getting really comfortable with, how do I keep an eye on my team without continually pestering them? So having a project management tool of some sort where your team puts everything about their project, where it is, roadblocks, and whatnot, so that you can just go and look instead of messaging them like, hey, where is this project? Or another consideration might be to have a meeting every Monday morning where each person shares their goals for that week for each project. So that helps you as the leader and the other teammates know where projects are. It gives teammates the chance to ask their peers for help, voice roadblocks they're encountering. So that's kind of one piece of it, is this, how do we project manage in a way that allows you to not micromanage? And then I think there's another big bucket of...
Talitha, can I interrupt for a second? What tool do you guys use? We use Asana. Are you using something that's like Asana for project management?
Yeah, we've used a lot of different tools. We're currently using a Microsoft product. It is very, 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 very simple. So it's not, we've used Rike in the past, which is similar to Asana, very detailed. We've really simplified it recently, and it's actually quite nice. We weren't quite sure how it was going to go, but we learned very quickly, okay, you don't need 150 steps in your project life cycle to know where a project is. Like, there are other ways to do this. So it's kind of like what David is talking about, of not just doing things the way you've always done them, but looking at it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead and continue your thoughts.
So the other one I was going to share is the the skill of building trust and compassion in your team. It can be very easy, again, in a remote environment where teammates can't see each other, to wonder, like, is that person over there pulling their weight? Or, what are they doing? They're just walking their dog all day, or, whatever the assumption is. So assuming positive intent and having that be a core value of your team. And when teammates trust each other, it really frees up everyone to just do their own stuff, and actually people end up being more productive, I feel like, in a remote environment, because you have fewer interruptions. And then I think a skill that everyone, not just leaders, but everyone is needing to develop for this is written communication skills. So much more of our interactions is done in a written platform, whether that's an email that you're sending out, a team chat that you have, or maybe a web page that you've created to further engage with your learners. Written communication skills are a spotlight that I see right now, and one that definitely many people struggle with.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's one of my top things, because when I cannot be face to face with somebody, I realize I have got to communicate in words now how I'm really feeling, because you can't read it as easily off my face or my body language. So I've got to become intentional about writing. This is how I feel about this. This is my expectation. Things that we took for granted before, I now have to be intentional.
And on that note, Gary, one fun thing to do is to ask the team to share a GIF that demonstrates how they're feeling that day. That's
Great.
a fun one.
That's a good one. Valerie, same question to you.
Oh gosh, she used, those are all great. Those are all super great. And particularly the micromanaging one is that's a sore point for me, because I do not work well. I do not work well under that kind of situation.
Who does? Nobody.
I'm like, oh yeah, that one's, thank you for putting that one on the list. And it's just interesting, because I was in that situation some years back after Hurricane Katrina. I needed to be out of New York City, and I had very clear projects, and it's to the word that Gary used, them, expectations. What were the expectations? And I think as long as we stay clear on that, and we look at the results rather than the process of, well, maybe today Talitha did need to walk her dog, and that's okay. And, I bet he's cute and I want to see a picture now, and, like, whatever. But to that point, it's like, yeah, it's this shift of mindset to, I don't see the factory workers make the cereal, but when I go to the store and I buy a box of cereal and there's cereal in the box, I know they were working. Like, there's different ways to see the progress. And I think, that's one of the tenets sort of gamification, is make progress visible. And those little celebrations. I mean, it's not just birthdays you can celebrate. You can celebrate, hey, we, 80% of our tasks this week, go us, we rock, like, you can celebrate those things. And then that brings everybody back in, and they go, oh, okay, everybody, we were all working, we did that, we worked together, and everybody doesn't have to see what each person is doing necessarily. So I really liked her selections, and the written communication. Absolutely. I can tell you one of the projects I have right now at the law firm is I'm working on designing a proofreading course, because they want to revisit some of those skills. So that is in high demand right now. I would add, I think the only thing, a couple of them that I might add, and these kind of went with the earlier discussion, is as far as adaptability and creative thinking. I think people also need to get past the idea that creativity is about being in the arts, and that creativity is something you either are or aren't, because everybody's creative in their own way. And when we can sort of find that place and help people to really, develop that skill set of being creative, that goes right into the resilience, and it goes into all these other topics we talked about today, and being more resilient and agile and adaptable. And I can't remember all four she had, but many of them kind of went around that concept. And then also community. I think it's a skill that many leaders don't have. People come to me sometimes and ask me about LinkedIn, because they still think it's just a place where people went and put their resumes, and they've kind of not ever gone into that area. And there's so many leaders who have no presence in terms of social media. And I'm not saying they need to, be posting pictures of everything they eat and all that kind of stuff, but they haven't taken the time to intentionally build community so that when events like this happen, they didn't have people to go to. And some of us probably did.
Absolutely.
Some of us probably had that community that we could rely on and say, even if it was just like, wow, today is a really hard day. Like, I can't today. I just can't. My brain doesn't work today. But we had that community. And I think that's something else that leaders should be encouraged in some format. It doesn't have to be social media. It doesn't have to be LinkedIn, but to have that external community of people, not family, but, colleagues and peers that they can build that network with. I think that's also something to look at.
Excellent point. That's an excellent point. Let me get into the field of e-learning because this is an e-learning conference. So I'm going to talk a little bit about e-learning modules because I think we are supposed to be, the e-learning field is supposed to be a benefactor, right? Of the fact that we're working more remotely. We've seen some statistics earlier today, monster numbers, really, 325% more demand now for learning content. A lot of different companies and employees are saying that they understand the need to keep learning. Somehow, some way, this pandemic and the fact that we're more isolated has resurrected that need that I can't fall behind. So I've got to stay on top of things. I must take responsibility for my own career, all these things. So from a standpoint of e-learning, thinking about this coming decade, what do you see as needed to change in how we've done these modules, these online learning? I know David was referring back to the virtual classroom thing, but I'm thinking more of the constructed courses that we do so people can be self-paced, they have the interaction capability. But what things need to change in e-learning going forward to make it, let's say, the dominant way that people want to learn?
Talitha, want to go first? I don't want to. We're both being so polite. We're like, you first.
Go ahead, Valerie. I went first last.
I was just thinking, I mean, for me, and I put some questions out on LinkedIn a few months ago, even before I knew about this conference. And one of my questions was about, and Gary, I think you mentioned this in sort of that lunchtime sort of crossover period, how we bring the humanity and the human back into the e-learning process. Because when it's all e-learning modules, my question to people was, what do people do when they have a question about the content? Not technical, I can't get into the, it's not working for, but
right.
What do people do when they have a question about the content? And every response I got was, well, if it's well constructed, there won't be any questions. I was like, well, then you haven't created any curiosity. There should always be questions. And so I think for me, that's one of the things, and I know several people today talked about blended learning. And I think that is going to be a big piece of it, is how we look at the larger ecosystem. The e-learning has to fit within the workflow. It also has to fit within a learning flow, so that, the what's next. I always ask people like, well, what's next? And I don't mean the LMS suggests, because you watch this e-learning, you should watch this e-learning, but the what's next, and how we package it in, I would say, bite-sized, snack-sized, relevant, timely pieces, and then always give people some option to how do I get to a human? It's like when you call customer support on certain websites and you're like, I just want to talk to a human. Like, I think there's going to have to be some of that as well. It's like, if I'm in the middle of the course, I want to press 7 and get to a human. And so that's just a few of the things, just specifically narrowing it to the modules, because I do think we have to be more experimental. I think we have to think bigger and differently about what we mean by an e-learning module.
Great point.
which is going to be interesting because that gets into the whole idea of capturing the data and all that stuff. But I've seen courses and I've run courses through email or WhatsApp or like there's lots of technology out there and it all captures data, but then you of course got to put it all back together to prove that people did it.
Right. Great. Talitha, your turn.
Yeah, Valerie, I love that point about just getting to a human for support in e-learning and the comparison of the phone. Like, just let me press 7 and get a real person. That's so true. Yeah, I think, David Kelly mentioned embracing the full scope of everything that can be done. And I think that can be applied to e-learning as well. So part of the power in instructor-led training is that it creates experiences. So in an e-learning environment, we can do this by telling stories that resonate deeply with learners and creating highly engaging interactions that give hands-on experience. So avoiding at all costs the page turner of just hitting next over and over and over. I think scenario-based learning is working its way into many more e-learning pieces of content than it maybe previously did. And then creating social interaction. So kind of piggybacking on what Valerie said, but not just for reaching out with questions, but just ways to engage with other learners. So whether that's a leaderboard for friendly competition or a chat platform of some sort that is not needing everyone to be on there live at the same moment, but they're still able to piggyback on each other. And then obviously virtual and augmented reality experiences are on the rise, and that is a very fascinating thing entering e-learning that's giving that ability for a lot more hands-on type experiences.
Yeah, I love the word. I love that you talked about the experiential part of it, because that again is to that point of, we get trapped in the screen of just, I'm in the module. There's no reason that in a module you can't have people go do something.
Yes.
It doesn't always have to be in the module itself. It's like, the module is just the map.
Absolutely.
That's good. We're getting close. We got 5 more minutes. There was one topic that was very important to me that I want to get your opinion about. And it has to do with one of the speakers earlier this morning. Brian Kropp was talking about a concept called radical flexibility. That one of the changes that has occurred with a pandemic is something that he says we'll never come back to. We're not going to come back to a normal. So companies need to start embracing this thing called a radical flexibility. And it had a whole plethora of different things involved. Where are you going to work? When are you going to work? How much work should an employee be given? And one of the things that really hit us as a company is those families that had children that all of a sudden, it wasn't just that we were closed down as an office and the employees now were working from home, but they had children at home. And those children could not go to school or daycare. And all of a sudden, the responsibilities of taking care of the family and also taking care of work just exploded on us to the point where, wow, I've got to be flexible. I mean, we had no choice. I've got to give these employees the flexibility to take care of their kids. And so deadlines like a 5 o'clock deadline had to kind of go away. But I just want to get your feeling about this whole dynamic of the fact is that employees now have needed to have the flexibility. I think that Brian brought this great thing together that says there is actually productivity gains in having flexibility. I need to get your thoughts. What in this whole scenario of the dynamics of life and work is how we look at an employee's time, where they work, how much work they do. Is that going to change forever?
Yeah, so first off, for anyone who is on here who are parents and having to work and also take care of your children, you deserve a huge round of applause. Being a parent is really, really hard being an employee who makes a positive impact on your company is really, really hard. Doing both at the same time is absurdly hard. So I just want to take a minute to commend you and recognize the sizable challenge that this is for working parents. So I think, you said like companies, a lot of them haven't had a choice to extend grace. But my hope would be that companies would gladly extend grace to working parents who have no other option than to keep their kids at home. And I think part of this is I'm a really firm believer in work-life integration rather than work-life balance. So what this might look like for working parents is blocking off part of your work schedule to give your child uninterrupted help with schoolwork. That might mean that you're responding to work emails or working on projects after the kids are in bed. And I think companies need to be okay with that. And then I think, this isn't really a policy adaptation, but just to get everyone involved in the challenge that this is, I think it's important to, people without kids might not really understand how hard this is. So having a conversation with your team as a whole group for those who have children to share what their daily life looks like right now can be very enlightening. And sharing, those working parents sharing what their teammates can do to support them in this time, or certain things that they'd like a little extra patience with, like little hands entering the camera during a meeting, things that people without kids might be annoyed at, but say, hey, like I'm doing my best, please give a little grace and extra patience in this area.
That's good. Valary?
Yeah, I was to say the only other thing I wanted to add, because absolutely, I can't even imagine what, and if you're a school teacher who has children and you're still teaching and have the kids, it's crazy what's going on. But one of the challenges that I think is going to be particularly hard is there's a lot of companies that have both hourly and salaried employees, and it's much easier in some ways to offer the grace and everything to somebody who can do the work whenever, wherever. But especially as far as the e-learning component comes in, we have this assumption that because it's e-learning, it can be done 24 hours a day. It can't for all employees. And that's something that's going to have to really be looked at as we sort of juggle how this works, because an hourly employee can't do training or work or whatever whenever. That gets into all kinds of weird legal and fuzzy things and whatever. So I just think that's a whole nother layer that adds that, because as if we needed more complexity, but it's just kind of another conversation I think that needs to be had, though, because there is kind of this assumption that flexibility is going to be the same for everybody, and it can't be, unfortunately, not right now.
Great point, Valary.
Diana, are you interrupting us now?
I am. I popped in on you guys. Great conversation. I loved all the points you guys made. And I'll just throw one more into the mix as far as engagement goes. I've been working with a lot of businesses on how they're adapting to this, and huddles are a big thing, especially when you have sales teams. Getting them on a daily huddle, just to, as Talitha said, just to check in. How are you doing? Share an emoji about how you're feeling today, or what's the big win for today, and celebrating. Like getting people connected and keeping them as part of those little life celebrations are important. So you guys had some great conversation around this. We're going to move you guys over to the after party room, and I will share that link as you guys make your way over. Thank you so much for Talitha and Valary.
Yep.
We thoroughly enjoyed your contributions. And as they make their way over to the after party, anyone who would like to join them here can use the link that you see on your screen to join them in the after party. Just as a reminder, you will have to log out of the webinar in order to join the after party, because Zoom only allows one Zoom meeting at a time per user. So